If you told me going into the season, this would be the, I think, fourth video I was covering on Louisiana Monroe and the second video on Northwestern, I don't know why I thought on that. That just sounds like crazy talk at the time, but here we are. Last week of non-conference games for Louisiana Monroe, going to the Big Ten against the Northwestern Wildcats, and a surprisingly interesting matchup between Monroe and Northwestern, where the Northwestern Wildcats are only a 10.5, make it 11.5 point favorite against the Warhawks in the game that you have probably a mid-tier team in the Sun Belt against the second worst team in the Big Ten. Northwestern kind of proved that they weren't the worst by beating UCLA last week. That win against UCLA proving that the Preston Stone transfer from SMU to Northwestern wasn't the most disastrous transfer over, as that Nico trade from Tennessee to UCLA, essentially for Joey Aguilar, has so much gone in the favor of the Tennessee Vols. As Nico Iamaleava for UCLA now has gone 0-4 to start the UCLA career, where only until that last game against Northwestern had he not thrown a pick in his first 3 games, and they have lost their first 4 games, 2 of them to other non-conference opponents in the Mountain West with UNLV and New Mexico, and then just getting demolished by Utah as well. It wasn't even competitive for the New Mexico game either. And for Northwestern at least, this may be the last game that they win for the rest of the season, potentially. Now, both teams have really only had one truly horrendous showing. One you kind of figured with Monroe going against Alabama. Then for Northwestern, it was a Tulane game to start the season, as they were relatively competitive against Oregon in itself. Yes, they didn't really have that much of a chance against the Oregon Ducks, but yeah, 34-14 was a lot closer than the spread expected. Only being outgained by 60 yards and winning the time of possession by almost 5 minutes, they can show, even against the toughest competition, that they can actually break one out for a long gain, especially on the ground, with Deshaun Reeder getting that 79-yard touchdown run. Yes, a little bit out of hand already, but 79 yards against an Oregon defense that is thought to be very stout is something. Both of these teams, both Monroe and both Northwestern, they want to run the ball. Monroe averages just over 213 yards a game, and Northwestern 183 yards a game against overall better competition. Both teams in the hundreds in passing yards per game. Northwestern 116th in the country with 164 yards, and Louisiana Monroe bottom 10 in the country at 128, which hasn't been too much of a detractor early on outside of Alabama. Preston Stone has only showed one game on the season where he's thrown for over 200 yards, and that was against a FCS opponent in WIU, where he was very good. 3 of his 4 touchdown passes on the season, 21 of 29, 245, and those 3 touchdowns. Outside of that, 1 touchdown, 6 picks against FBS teams, so only touchdown has been against UCLA. Now, one thing I've seen through the tape of going through Preston Stone is the fact of whenever he does end up getting pressured in the middle, he does have a tendency of throwing high, which has led to a majority of those interceptions against Tulane. And in general, whenever he does miss high as well. Take it against Oregon, where he tries to throw up the middle to Griffin Wild. It hits off of his receiver's hands, leading to an interception by the incoming linebacker. Now, unfortunately, that doesn't appear to be the strength for Monroe as general, being able to get pressure up the middle, as the only defensive tackle who has a sack on the season is James Smith with 1, the junior D tackle, as majority of their 14 sacks are by edge rushers Cavante Wells, Dylan Howell with 4, and cornerback Darko Perkins McAllister, who has 3 of them as well. So a lot of their pressures is off of the edge rushers and off of the corner blitzes as well. So that's one where if Monroe's going to try to get some success against Preston Stone, they're going to need someone more of their interior to be able to get pressure in, affect the throws, be able to get a potential tip pass as well. Now, Northwestern has had a pretty solid dueling backfield. The bruising back, Caleb Komalafe, I knew I was going to botch that up, and Joseph Hyman, more of the scat back, both of them combining for just over 460 yards in the first 4 games of the season. Komolafe having both of the 2 touchdowns has been really pacing their offense whenever they've been able to get anything productive consistently. While Braylon McReynolds has been the lead back for Monroe for the first 4 games on the season, you have had in each of the individual wins a different running back really kind of stand out. Almost more of a surprise. You've kind of figured Zach Palmer-Smith was going to be the big one going into that first game against St. Francis. Then McReynolds had 113 yards rushing. You had in the UTEP game, yes, McReynolds was the leading rusher then, but in just 5 carries, Dorian Lewis had a 72-yard breakout run. And then also this past week, you had Zach Palmer-Smith in his 8 carries. After struggling, really not being much of a factor in the first 3 games, 8 carries, 84 yards. All of them basically having a single breakout run that made their statistics honestly look very impressive. Really, this game is going to end up being decided on who's able to stop the opposing team's running attack more effectively, as Monroe's top 15 in the country in rushing defense, giving up 84 yards a game. Funny enough, just a touch more than LSU's. So their passing defense is actually really good, which doesn't go off of Monroe's strength. So this is going to likely be a very run-heavy game, so I would almost expect this to be very low scoring. And whoever has to force the opposing quarterback to, if put under pressure, being rushed through the middle, both of these quarterbacks have been prone to make mistakes in the air, to turn the ball over, not be protected with the ball, and these defenses have been able to pressure the quarterback. Northwestern's probably most outstanding stat for this season has been their pass rush, so it's not to the Warhawks' advantage to be able to throw the ball 20, 30 times a game. You could get this being a game where Armena throws another 8 for 14 game, and really that is their recipe for success. So the lower scoring game is probably going to end up favoring, I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up favoring Monroe, because I don't think they'll be able to hold up in a higher scoring game. Yes, Northwestern does score less, but there's more consistent playmakers in the air with, mostly Griffin Wild, as he more than doubles everyone else on the team in receptions and yards. He's the only one who actually has over 100 yards receiving, and he more than triples the next closest, which is kind of insane. But regardless on it, it's going to be very run heavy. Expect this to be relatively low scoring. If Monroe gets one of their running backs, maybe they even get Tyrell Reed, a 4th running back, to get a surprisingly long run. I'd almost say, if that's the case, Monroe has a shot in this. And if that is the case, just like last year, they'll go into the meat of their conference games with only 1 loss of the season. We'll see how it goes. If that ends up happening for Northwestern, I know it's the first year for their coach. He may already end up being on the hot seat, even with as low of expectations as the Wildcats have. So we'll see what happens. That game's actually going to be in a couple hours off of it. So what is the over-under? Okay, it's 42.5, so like a 27-17 final. Honestly, that does seem reasonable, but that could actually be a lot closer. Monroe has a pretty decent shot, so we'll see what happens. 2:30 today. So yeah, we'll see if the Warhawks can pull off the upset. All right, thank y'all for watching. More videos coming soon. Probably going to give a little bit of reaction on this Warhawk Wildcats game, especially if it ends up being, but yeah, going into the main portion of conference play. We'll see what happens. What the expectations, see if Monroe actually has a pretty decent shot of making a bowl game. All right, see y'all in the next one.